thank you for this opportunity to join this event and share some Torah that I hope you'll find relevant. I was asked to say something in the line of Chasidut, so let me try to do that. I'm actually secretly a Chasid. I get fired if I admit it more broadly, but let me share with you something very deeply basic to the Hasidic tradition, which of course is basic to Torah. Mofson spoke about the rejuvenation, the reanimation of Torah from depths of darkness. So let's think about that. There are very few ideas more intrinsic to Hasidus than that idea. So let me try to express this. I'm sure you know that Hasidus is based on Kabbalah. All of Torah is Israeli, that is the inner genetic material of Torah. And Hasidus brought that out in a particular way, in the way of Avodah Hashem. Tanya is a Sefer Avodah. But one of the most basic ideas in Kabbalah, and we'll see if time we try to speak out the Hasidus expansion of this idea, is the very beginning of the Eitz Chaim. As you know, the Eitz Chaim is the central work of Kabbalah of the Arizal. Very difficult work. But let me tell you the very first theme that he develops in that classic work, and see if we can begin to understand it. Again, this will sound very abstract. Kabbalah is a very abstract wisdom. But let's try to understand this idea and then see if we can feel how it extends into the reality that we live. What he says is that there are two lights that shine. Two lights. There's a first light and a second light. There's many names, or Rishon, or Chazer, or Rishon, or Sheni. There's many different terms given to this. But there are two lights that shine. Incidentally, why are we talking about lights? Why is that the mashal, and much more than a mashal, of course, but why is that the mode of discussion? Because the world is really a revelation of something. The world is not a thing in itself, it's only a revelation of something. The world is not a thing. The world is, Hashem is the thing, Hashem is the reality. The world is a revelation. A well-known idea that it's actually more accurate to say the world is a hiding, not a revelation. But nevertheless, in that hiding of the supernal light, we have a revelation. And so Torah itself begins with light. And so very deeply important that the mode of discussion is light. But be that as it may, there are two lights that shine. The first light is perfect. It is incredibly powerful. In fact, the first light is powerful because it needs to open a space where there's no space before. The first light has to open up a space, carve out a space where there is no space. That's what it does. And to do that, it has to be indescribably powerful. But as soon as it's done that, it leaves. It's done its work, it carves out the space is open, and then the first light leaves. It goes back where it came from, and it leaves an aching emptiness, a terrible loneliness, a situation bereft of ecstasy. And that longing brings back a second light. The second light is nothing compared to the first. Nothing at all. The second light is almost nothing. If you would like a comparison between the first and the second, the difference would be something like the difference between a human being who's alive and the little bit of life left in the bones in a grave. That's called Havla de Garmi. A little bit of, just enough to keep the bones in existence that the Tches Amesim can take place. So the first light is unbelievably powerful. It does what it has to do and then it leaves. But the point of the exercise, the whole point of this process is the second light. The second light is nothing, almost insignificant compared to the first, but it's the one that's intended and the one that lasts. Now, I'm sure you all feel very Kabbalistically enlightened, but that's the idea. So let's talk out a little bit, what is this very rarefied and abstract idea? What is it telling us? What's its importance? How can we apply it? How do we experience it? And I'll try to show that everything you ever experience in life is these two lights. Everything, every Torah idea, every relationship, every aspect of your own growth. There's nothing in the world, if this is the beginning of the Eitz Chaim, then it's the foundation of everything. So let's try and bring it down in layers. You know, I'm sure that all ideas in Torah have many parallels. They're Kabbalistic, then they apply on a philosophical level, what we call Hashkafa, then they apply in what we call Musa, then they apply in Halacha. They're always parallel streams, and they find the same ideas expressed in all of these themes. Chasidut has a particular take on each of these themes as well. Let's look in what we might call the philosophical. What are the two lights? The first light is the opening of possibilities. In Torah terminology, we call it the Pacaya, which then leads to a Pacaya. There's a Pacaya, that means before a thing can be in the world, it has to be possible. The way the Kabbalists put it, they say before a thing can exist in the world, it must have a place. You can't have a thing in the world unless it has a place to be, or in more philosophical terms, a space. A thing cannot exist without a space. First there must be the space or the place for the thing, then the thing can exist. Before a thing can happen in the world, it must be possible. The possibility has to open up. Once the possibility opens up, then the thing can happen. And the possibility is always perfect. The possibility, the potential is always endless and perfect. The actual is always terribly limited. You wake in the morning. What is the potential of the day? Endless. Endless. You could do anything today. And it's perfect. Nothing's gone wrong yet. The potential is always perfect. At the end of the day, when you collapse exhausted, at the end of the day, how much of those possibilities did you actualize? Almost nothing. Out of all the millions of possibilities you are, but that's the one that's real, that's the one that lives, the rest disappear. So the first stage, the first light is the light of endless possibilities. The Pacaya. It's perfect, it's powerful, it's endless, it's infinite, there's no limitations. But it gives way, it leaves, it's supplanted by the real. And the real is only Another way this is put in our sources is that the first stage is male and the second is female. The male is always endless possibility. The phase of the male is always endless perfect possibility. The female is always the finite, limited, constrained, narrow form of reality. When a child is conceived, what does the father give? Half a genetic code, that's all. And by the way, he gives those by the billion. I'll never forget the experience as a medical student of having to dissect a human embryo. You see that the organs that form seed, they begin as part of the kidneys in the embryo. They start moving down in the body to be form organs. In the male, they become organs that form seed by the billion. In the woman, the ovary forms eggs one at a time. And the way a child is conceived, billions from the male meet one from the female. The male is a hopeless overabundance of wannabe hopefuls. And the female is the one that becomes real. The male is the potential. In Hebrew, the word for female is nikeva. Nikeva means to make specific, to make limited. The Kabbalists say that the joy of this world is that it's here. The curse of this world is that it's only this one. The joy of the male is infinite potential. The curse of the male is only potential. The joy of the female is that she brings birth to the world. The curse of the female is only this one. All the millions of others that could have been or not. The word nekeva, when Lavan said to Yaakov, Nakva elai schracha ve'etena, fix your wages and I'll pay you, give me a number. Imagine a person walks up, Nakva, female, make it feminine, give me a number. You can't be paid unless you have a number. Imagine someone walks up to you and they say, quote a number, I'll give you that much money. Say any number, I'll give you that much money. This is male, more and more and more. While this is happening, you get nothing. Sooner or later, you have to say a number. When you say the number, two things happen. Number one, you get paid. Number two, not 1 cent more. For a thing to live in the world, it has to have the female dimension of birth that gives it a reality. The curse of that is it can only take this form. We refer to Hashem as male because He's endless potential. The world is always feminine. All the words for the earth are female in Hebrew. Eretz, Adama, Kelim, Avanim, Sodeh, all these words are feminine in Hebrew. So the world of potential is perfect, but it leaves. And all it leaves is the real that you achieved, which is nothing compared to the potential, but it's the real thing at last. That's you. Let's bring it down further. All life experience has two phases. There's the phase of perfection, of inspiration, that never lasts. It's always perfect, it's exhilarating, but it never lasts. And then there's the phase of hard work, of selection, and making it real. Let's take a national example, the Jewish people. So we're born in a blaze of miracles. What are the phases of the birth of the Jewish people? Jewish people in Mitzrayim, Egypt, unbelievable crescendo of miracles, each one higher than the one before. You know, as the Maharal explains, and many others as well, the Nisim, the Makkos, the plagues in Egypt were not simply a sequence. They were an escalation to a crescendo, each one higher than the one before. The Maharal puts it like this. He says, each of the Makkos in Mitzrayim, each of the plagues in Egypt was a reversal of the order of creation. The world was created with 10 statements, right? 10 statements, 10 sayings. The first being Bereshit in the beginning. The second, let there be light. 10 statements. The plagues in Egypt reversed the process. Maharal explains the reason was because the Egyptians had so contaminated all 10 spheres, all 10 layers of reality. Are we talking Chasidut tonight? We can talk a little openly. The world, as you know, is based on 10 layers, emanations, spheres, if you want to call them that. That's why the Torah is permeated by 10 statements of creation, 10 commandments, 10 ordeals in the desert, 10 ordeals of Avram Avinu. The world was built in 10 stages from an infinitesimal dimensionless point called Bereshit, then a revelation called light, and 10 layers. The Egyptians had made so toxic and contaminated so badly all 10 layers of reality that they needed to be peeled away. When you have many layers and you have to peel them away, you peel them from the outside in. So each Makkah, each plague in Egypt came to purify one of the layers of reality that the Egyptians had damaged. So they reversed the order. The first statement of creation, Bereshit, pure beginning. What was the last of the plagues in Egypt? Destruction of the firstborn, killing of the wrong sort of a beginning. The second statement of creation, let there be light. The second last plague in Egypt, the plague of darkness. Think about it, it's an amazing thing. No time now to work through it, but when you get back to the 10th of those plagues, you get that final one, the firstborn are destroyed. You've reached back to the moment of Bereshit. You've reached back to a moment of creation where there's nothing. The 10 Commandments, of course, reflect this. Which is the first of the commandments? I am. A statement of pure origin. That's why in the Haggadah we say that the 10th Makkah in Mitzrayim, Ani v'lo malach, Ani v'lo saraf, Ani v'lo shlech. I alone. Nothing else, no intermediaries. Because you've got back to that moment of... So imagine that midnight when the firstborn are destroyed. The Jewish people experience a voltage they've never experienced, unheard of experience. And 7 days later it gets better when the sea splits. No human ever experienced anything like that. And then comes the surprise. Hashem says, get the message? Now, let's see you do it. And he drops us in the desert. The desert is always a place of death forces. Desert is a place that is, again, when you're 6 years old, the desert is a place of sand and heat. But when you're a little more sophisticated, you understand the desert is a place of death. The Jewish people faced 10 ordeals in the desert and failed all of them. So first Hashem demonstrates the process, 10 plagues lifting you to an unbelievable crescendo of experience, and then he says, get it, now you do it. And I'll meet you at Sinai when you've done it yourself. Because it's the second light that's the important one. The first one he does, perfect, unbelievable, it's demonstration of perfection. But the world wasn't created for him to demonstrate what he can be. The world was created for us to demonstrate what he can be. The Kotzker Rebbe, we're talking Chasidus, the Kotzker said this, it says, Hashemayim Shemayim L'Hashem, listen to this incredibly beautiful Hasidic insight. Hashemayim Shemayim L'Hashem, the heavens are heavens for Hashem, but the world he gave to human beings. The simple meaning is the heavens are divine, godly, and the earth is human. Listen to what he said. Hashemayim Shemayim L'Hashem, the Shemayim are already Shemayim L'Hashem, but he gave us the Aretz to make Aretz Shemayim L'Hashem. And it's in the words. It doesn't say Hashemayim L'Hashem. Hashemayim Shemayim L'Hashem. The Shemayim already made it to Shemayim L'Hashem. He gave us Aretz to make Shemayim L'Hashem. So here's the pattern. The Jewish people uplifted amazingly, and at the point of almost impossible level to contain. The Baal Hashem says they've lost it. The Baal Hashem says the reason they left Egypt so fast was because anymore they would have exploded. He says when the Arizal says they would have disappeared, it doesn't mean down, it means up. The voltage was so potent, had they lasted any more in Mitzrayim, they would have exploded. They weren't ready for that. And then they walked through the desert. Now you put each painful step. Pesach means to leap over. You leap to the 50th level with no intermediate levels. And then the second night, every painful step you've got to do yourself. One step after another, count the Omer, one day after another. You want to meet me at Sinai, I want to meet you as equals. First I'll show you how it's done, then I'll step back and you do it. So we meet as equals. The month of Pesach is Nisan. Nisan means miracles. Nisim are what he does. Nisan is the zodiac, the mazal of the month is the sheep. That's a passive animal that just follows. The second month, Iyar, is the month of the bull. Doesn't follow at all. A bull has its own willful strength. Completely opposite characteristic. First, Hashem does, we follow. Then he steps back, we have to do it ourselves. And the month of the giving of the Torah, Sivan, is Toimim. Perfect harmony of twins. The two luchos, Hashem and us, the written and the oral law, Moshe and Aaron, all the dualities coming together in perfect harmony. So the pattern of birth of the Jewish people is first all done for free, perfect, and then the difficult, dangerous process, we become real. Take a personal example. The child in the womb, the Gemara says, he taught the whole Torah. The baby in the womb, there's a light lit above his head, by the way, that's in the place of the tefillin. The light lit, what's the light lit above his head? The Rashi says you have to wear tefillin at the same place where the head is open. When a baby's born, there's a skull, the skull is missing. The first thing I do as a doctor, examine a newborn. Now, don't try this at home, you have to be careful. But you put your hand over the top of the baby's head, you can feel the brain pulsate. There's no bone there. Tefillin have to reopen that connection. Arizal says Adam Rishon had tefillin growing out of his head. His high parts of his neshama were in that part of his head, which he lost when he... So the baby has a light lit above his head. That's why the Rambam says a person who never wears tefillin never is connected. And he sees one end of the world to the other. He knows his future. He knows all of cosmic reality. He knows the whole Torah. And he's about to be born. He gets a blow and he forgets it all. Why would Hashem teach a child the whole Torah only to make him forget? The answer is first light and second light. The first light, the child's given it for free, automatically perfect totality. And then he's born, and the point of being born in the world is to make it yours. The point of learning in the world is simply to recapture a Torah that you once had for free. This is why when you learn something spiritually true, you don't have a sense of learning, you have a sense of recognition. You say, I know that's right. How do you know it? Because it's resonating with your own inner Torah. By the way, the God of Vilna says, we're allowed to mention. Come and sit here. The God says something amazing. He says, he brings a medrash that says that when a person dies, 3 angels come to greet you. 3 malachim come to greet you. One comes to add up all your mitzvahs, one comes to add up all your averis, and the third comes to see, what have you amounted to? If you're a man, it's essentially your Torah learning. If you're a woman, it's essentially your Torah practice in the world, the Torah's chesed, the birth that you've given to Torah in the world. Says the Gaon of Vilna, as that third angel approaches you, the one that comes to see what you've amounted to and achieved in the world, as he approaches, you recognize his face. It turns out to be the one that learned with you before you were born. And now at the end of your life, he's come to see, no, that amazing chavrusa that we had together where I gave it all to you. And then you went out on your own to make it yours. Did you do it? Moshe Shapiro said something very beautiful. The Gemara says a child, a person who lives in the world and has Torah but doesn't practice it, doesn't make it real, doesn't express it. After all, mitzvahs, you know, Torah is male and mitzvahs are female. Torah is the theory and mitzvahs are the practice. Torah is the infinite wisdom and mitzvahs are the practical, all the mitzvahs are physical. Virtually every mitzvah is a physical action. So the Gemara says a person who lives in the world and knows Torah perfectly but does not perform, does not fulfill it, doesn't do the mitzvahs, such a person, listen to this amazing thing, the Gemara says, it would have been better for that person, for his mother's afterbirth, to cover his face and smother him at the point of birth, and he should have died there. A person who knows Torah, perfect mastery of Torah, but doesn't practice in the world, he should have been smothered to death at the point of birth. That's a very bizarre. Said Rav Moshe Shapiro, you know what's being said here? If you want to live in the world with Torah but not practice, the ideal time to die is the point of birth. You'll never have it as good as that. Just before birth is when the child has the whole Torah perfectly. That's all you want. That's the time to go. You're not born into the world for that. You're born into the world to bring it into reality in the world. You have to know it and practice it. Let's take another example. You can cut life anywhere, you'll see these two stages. Take childhood and adulthood. Childhood is a time of endless inspiration. Children have no sense of limitation. Ask a normal 5-year-old what he's going to be when he's big. He'll tell you everything. My son told me he's going to be an underwater rubbish truck driver, astronaut, do it all. Children don't have a sense of limitation. The world is larger than life. They do it all. And as you get older, the world closes in on you. Those are the two stages. You see children as they begin to grow, they start to realize they can't do. I was walking to shul with my little son when he was 6. And for a couple of minutes he's silent and he looks at me with concern and he says, Abba, I'm really worried because I'm not sure if I'm going to marry Debbie or Frida. So I said, what's the problem? He said, because whichever one I marry, the other one's going to be so upset. We arrive at shul, we walk up the steps, this is Benny. He stops and he says, but Abba, I just realized whoever I marry, all the others are going to be so upset. Confident young man, huh? Suddenly realizing you can't do it all. By the way, this is why young men often resist marriage. Because a young man looks out at the world of women and they're all amazing, each one more amazing than the next. And there's thousands of them. But if you get married, he's going to have only one. That's a sense of limitation. The Maharal, by the way, says that's why a man can marry many women. He is a source of multi-potential in Torah. But one woman in a right mind would want more than one husband. One's usually more than enough to manage. And wherever you look in the Baal Tshuva world, there's a phase of inspiration. The typical story is a person is amazed by what he learns. But it doesn't always last. It always does not last. I'll never forget, it was a young Baal Tshuva, been learning for a couple of years in Yerushalayim. He was standing next to a certain Rosh Yeshiva, who himself was a Baal Tshuva 40 years before. He's a Rosh Kollel, well known today. He said to the young man, how's it going in Yeshiva? The young man said, it's very difficult. Very difficult. I sit and learn Gemara, I sweat blood to understand. It's very difficult. The rabbi said to him, I see you're in phase 2. What about marriage? Marriage has 2 phases. Marriage has a stage called romance. We don't even have a word for that in Hebrew. Rav Dessler used to say, there's no word for it, it's an illusion. Romance is the heady swirl of emotion that happens, got no content. What is romance? You're sitting in this room, this person walks in, suddenly you get this sort of, things look pink. Music starts playing, things get hazy, you get the tight chest. What is that? One young man said to me, Rabbi, you have to help me. I married the wrong girl. I said, how long have you been married? He said, 2 months. I said, why is she the wrong girl? He said, when we got married, I used to look at her, I couldn't breathe. Now, 2 months later, breathing fine. I had to explain to this young fellow that if 2 months after marriage you're having trouble breathing, you got asthma, But that's how it is. Phase 1 is always amazing and inspired, but it doesn't last. By the way, one of the tragedies of our society is they teach our children, they paint them this amazing picture of romance and they label it love. That's wrong. Love is what happens after 30 years of giving to somebody. And so when that inspiration stops, they think they married the wrong person. We live in a quick fix generation. Everybody wants to be in the first phase. If you buy your child a computer, they're doomed. Doomed. You switch on a computer, it does 10 billion functions in the first 2 microseconds. If it does 5 billion, it's called slow. If you buy your child a computer, you must make them plant a garden. The Gemara says you learn loyalty, tenacious attachment to reality from making things grow. It takes a week after week, month after month, a season, until something grows. Then you learn something about life. Marriage, by the way, it isn't only two phases. The Gemara says that marriage has another phase that comes before, when husband and wife in the spiritual world are fused as one. Man and woman are fused at the back in the spiritual world. There's no back. The back is always the side. Again, in Kabbalah, the back is the side of darkness. In Hebrew, achor, which is the back, is the same as acher, which means foreign. It's a side of excretion and darkness and non-recognizability. So there's no back. There's husband and wife are fused at the back. There's only two fronts. Perfect situation, but no relationship. Then they're torn apart. In Kabbalah, that's called the Nasira. And then they're brought down to the world as two people to find each other and fuse face to face in an act of bonding, through the effort of bonding into one. But it's again phase one and phase two. Phase one is the original oneness that's free and perfect. And then they're brought into the world with a dangerous exposure of the back. And that's where it becomes real. You know, the original archetypal Jewish marriage, Avram and Sarah, as they transition from the world of marital purity, that's called Israel, Eretz Israel, to the world of marital contamination, that's called Egypt, which Chazal called the Ervas Haaretz. At that moment he turns to his wife and he says, please tell them you're my sister. What does that mean? Every man should think of his wife as his sister. A brother and sister are two people who are separate, who share a common origin. That's exactly what husband and wife are. They're two separate people who have a common origin. They were once fused. The Maharal says the world began by brother marrying sister. That's called Olam Chesed Yiboneh. That was the perfect marriage originally. There were only brothers and sisters originally. And so it goes. Wherever you look, you'll see these two phases. Let me mention just one more. In Jewish history, there are two phases. There's the phase called Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah. That was a phase that lasted until 2,500 years ago. The world was luminescent with revelation. There was Torah being spoken by Nevi'im, by prophets. Miracles were taking place. Hashem revealed himself openly. The voltage was 1,000,000 volts. And then we had Purim and Hanukkah. And between those two, 150 years apart, the light faded completely. At Purim it began to fade. Purim is a Megillah that doesn't have Hashem's name. It's an argument whether it's Nevuah or only Ruach HaKodesh. The woman, by the way, who was the heroine of the story, her name means the hidden one. Purim means the luck of the draw. You don't see Hashem's hand. The miracle is hidden. And 150 years later, Hanukkah has nothing. There's nothing written at all. Hanukkah was the last wave goodbye from the world of miracles. And for 2,300 years we've seen nothing. We are walking through the long walk through the desert of human history. The first phase, when Hashem revealed himself openly, there were no disbelievers, no unbelievers then. Idolatry was another problem of dealing with intermediaries, but there were no atheists then. Greece introduced atheism. When the Greeks brought to the world the idea that there may be nothing out there, because nothing can be seen anymore. And so history has two phases. Nevuah, Nisim, Torah Shebiksav, Hashem revealing himself openly. And for the last 2,300 years, phase two, what the Ramban calls walking through Midbar Ha'amim. The long walk through the desert where all we have is Emunah, which means a loyalty to an idea. Anyway, this is the theme. In Chasidus, you find time and again the idea that it's in the darkness that the great light can be shown. This is where we shine the light. The world wasn't created to demonstrate what he could do. The purpose of phase one is to absorb the voltage and get charged up. That's what you need, the inspiration. That's what you get from your Rebbe. And then when the Rebbe leaves, when the world goes dark, then you walk through the desert. You have to make it shine yourself. The Rambam says life is like standing on a dark plain on a stormy night. You stand beaten by the wind and lashed by the rain and hopelessly lost. And at your moment of greatest despair, unexpectedly there's a flash of lightning. And that instant you see the road clearer than by day, and as you see it the light disappears. And the rest of the night you walk through the storm on memory alone of a flash that you once saw clearly. Some see more flashes, some see less, but no one walks in it. But it's in the darkness that we get real. The person who doesn't understand gets depressed in the darkness. The person who understands, this is where you can shine your light. This is Torah Shabbat Peh. You figure it out yourself. You create Torah. Anyway, in honor of the event, this is introduction to a theme that Chasidus, I would say, shone a special light on. Chasidus, you find that the darker the situation, the more Kedusha can be extracted from it. That's a remarkable Jewish idea. When a normal person would start getting depressed and giving up, that's where we come alive. It's in the places of the potentially greatest contamination. That is where you can extract the sparks of Kedusha that will take us eventually from the original light that was perfect through a darkness to a light that once again will be perfect. Thank you.